So I saw that 7 people in here do yoga. If you have ever done yoga, can you raise your hand? A few people. Okay. So yoga, I think, has a stereotype. There's a stigma. And the male yoga teacher, I think people often think of the male yoga teacher as strapping on a little loincloth, going to a mountaintop, wrapping his legs around his head, spending the day in prayer while restricted to a diet of seeds and water. And the practice of yoga, I think people often think of the practice of yoga as being overly traditional or physically impossible, something that's not for them. So I want to show you right now how yoga is absolutely accessible and totally and deeply relevant to every single person in this room because it gives us a deeper sense of the moment. And in the world that we're living in with all of the distractions and information and stimulation, there's nothing more healing than a deeper sense of the moment. So we're going to do a little yoga right now. All you have to do is just take your arms to the sides. You can stand up or you can sit down, but I would love if you would please do this. So at first, so just find a comfortable spot because we're going to hold this for like 20 minutes. No, just kidding. But find a comfortable spot so that you can be in the moment here. So at first, this is going to feel very simple, and then your shoulders are going to start to burn. You're going to feel increased sensation, heightened emotion. We're going to create a little crisis in your shoulders. And you're going to see how in all the ancient Eastern spiritual arts, karate, kung fu, tai chi, yoga, they teach not to apply force, hustle, or effort in the midst of intensity, but rather to soften, relax, surrender, breathe. And there's nothing, don't do that, keep your arms to the sides. There's nothing more powerful than the breath. In a 24-hour period, we take approximately 20,000 breaths, and a lot of days go by where we don't pay attention to the sound of even a single breath. And the yogis say there's nothing more soothing to the mind and body than the breath. So just go ahead, and as this starts to burn, I really want you to breathe. It's said that the effect that the breath has on the mind is the effect that a mother's voice has on the baby. So it's very soothing. I want to share a story with you now. The year was 2005, and I was leading a yoga retreat. We had about 30 people to Maya Tulum, which is the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. And we went to sleep that night. There was a little Category 1 hurricane about several hundred miles off the coast. It was no big deal. And we woke up the next morning and it jumped 4 categories and became a Category 5 monster, Hurricane Wilma, the largest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin. In this moment of peak intensity, it had 175-mile-an-hour sustained winds. So Hurricane Katrina had just hit in the United States. And so you could say that people were scared because this was bigger than Katrina and it was coming right for us. So your shoulders are starting to burn. I'm aware of that. Stay with it if you can. Use your breath. So I went to the leader of the retreat center. It was a very rustic place. And I said to her, "What do we do?" And she started crying. They had no evacuation plan. So as you can imagine, people were very nervous, to say the least. And there's something in psychology that's called your crisis personality, your disaster personality, which basically states that in the midst of crisis, that a different personality arises, that we have a reaction. Sometimes that reaction's good, sometimes it's not so good. So as conditions were deteriorating, the surge was rising, the winds were picking up. The people on the yoga retreat who were very successful, type A, had all their ducks in a row, owned businesses, seemed on top of their lives. In the midst of crisis, they became difficult, impossible, unruly, rude. Meanwhile, the people on the retreat who were a little bit weird, maybe had a screw loose, a little bit of air in their head, in the midst of crisis, they were calm, cool, helpful, collected, like a pleasure to be around. So right now, basically, we're stimulating crisis in your arms. Who are you becoming right now? If you're getting mad at me, that's your issue, not mine. So see if you can just start to stay with it now. This is going to really say a lot about who you are, is how you handle these kind of situations. Courage is grace under pressure. So I want to share with you a couple examples of people who did not respond well in the midst of crisis. Zidane, the final of the 2006 World Cup. Over 1 billion people were watching around the world. The Italian player in the blue was taunting Zidane. I think he said something about his sister. And Zidane turned around and headbutted the guy. He was kicked out of the game. France went on to lose the World Cup in penalty kicks, which I think was Zidane's specialty. So he really could have benefited from the yoga breathing. William Murdoch, the first officer of the RMS Titanic, the guy steering the Titanic. So the Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Stay with it now. I know we're almost there. It had 16 airtight chambers, and 4 of those chambers would have needed to have been punctured for the Titanic to sink. So they figured, how in the world could that happen? So I was reading not too long ago in the New York Times, it said that the Titanic, if it would have hit the iceberg head on, it would not have sunk. A couple chambers would have been punctured, a few people would have died in the impact, but it would not have sunk. But because he decided to turn, it punctured 1, 2, 3, 4 chambers, and the rest is history. So go ahead and inhale, lift your arms high to the sky. Slowly lower your hands to your heart. Just take a moment and notice how your mind has relaxed. The moment has expanded. Feels good. It says so much, our relationship to the moment says so much about our character. Go ahead and sit down. Particularly in moments of crisis, but also in moments of beauty, in moments of sadness, deliciousness, in nature, in awe. You know, our relationship to the moment is really, really important. And you never know when an important moment can happen in your life. I live in New York City, and there's an advertising campaign right now for the lottery, and the slogan is, "Good things can happen in an instant." You just never know. So I've been forever fascinated with the power of a moment since I was 15 years old. And that's when my father took me to Game 1 of the 1988 World Series. So that's the championship series of baseball. And I grew up in Los Angeles, so it was the Dodgers versus the Oakland A's. My team was the Dodgers. It was at Dodger Stadium. There was 56,000 people. The Dodgers were losing. It was not looking good. They were down to their last out. And their MVP that year was a guy named Kirk Gibson. Kirk Gibson was so badly injured that he wasn't even playing in the game. So being that the Dodgers were down to their last out, they called Kirk Gibson to the plate. Now, mind you, he was so badly injured that if he got a base hit, he would have barely been able to make it to first base, let alone second. So he dug into the batter's box. He was barely fouling off pitch after pitch. And as a fan, you were just waiting for the inevitable strikeout and to go home sad and defeated. And then something amazing happened. Kirk Gibson got a hold of a pitch, hit a towering fly ball, went over the right field fence. The Dodgers dramatically won the game. They went on to win the championship. It's one of the most famous moments in American sports history. I want to share that with you for a moment.
All year long, they looked to him to light the fire. And all year long, he answered the demand. 0-1. An effort to run that far. So the Dodgers trying to catch lightning right now. 4-3 A's, 2 out, 9th inning. Not a bad opening act. High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
With one swing, Gibson gave the Dodgers a stunning 5-4 triumph and forever earned a place in baseball lore.
So let me tell you where my father and I were sitting when he hit that home run, in the backseat of his car driving down the freeway, because we left early. We missed one of the greatest moments in the history of American sports to beat 20 minutes of traffic in the parking lot. And I tell you this story because I think it's something that most of us can relate to, because we're missing important moments in our lives with our children, with our friends, with our coworkers, with our families, in nature. We're missing important moments because we've got so much going on. We're so distracted. There's so much in emails and tweets and status updates and check-ins, not to mention voicemails and obligations and errands and to-dos. It's just crazy. And there's a great yogi named Iyengar, and he says that we confuse speed and movement for all there is in life. We confuse speed and movement for all there is in life. And there's no doubt that speed and movement and efficiency are important, especially in regard to business. But when they come at the expense of enjoying life, there's a major imbalance. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of the Joshua Bell experiment. It's worth remembering that. The Washington Post did an experiment where they put a very famous violinist named Joshua Bell in a Washington, D.C. subway stop during rush hour. They surrounded him with hidden cameras. He had his $1.5 million Stradivarius antique violin, and they wanted to see if people would stop and listen. So over the course of almost an hour, 1,000 people walked by on their way to work, and only 7 people stopped, and only 1 for really more than a moment. So the question is, would you have stopped for Joshua Bell? I don't know that I would have. Do you take time to savor food, to watch the sunset? Or are the demands of life such that we don't have time anymore for beauty? Thoreau said that the perception of beauty is a moral test. Now, I personally love technology. I have an iPhone, an iPad, a MacBook Pro. When this thing rings in my pocket, it's like a slot machine. I get so excited. But I think I'm reaching a point where I'm no longer using technology. Technology is using me. And I worry about it. I liken it to a cigarette. My friend's mom was recently telling us that 40 years ago, when she was pregnant, she didn't feel good. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Go home and have a martini and a cigarette. You'll be fine." And I guess 40 years ago, cigarettes, people didn't really question the impact that they would have on your health, but I'm sure that there were certain people, certain pockets of society that had to question the impact that a cigarette would have on your health. And in the same way, I think it's really important that there are certain people, certain conversations that we start having about the impact that technology has on our quality of life and the way that it affects us, especially in sacred moments with the people that we love most. Now, think about technology. There's no example of technology that's an extension of our feelings, of our senses, of our emotions. Every form of technology right now is an extension of the mind. So our mind is over-agitated, and our senses are beginning to atrophy. When you go into a moment, we capture that moment as a photo or a video on our mobile phone, as a status update or a tweet. It pales in comparison to capturing that moment as a scent and a taste and a touch. And the most powerful of all the senses is smell, scent. That scent is the only one of the senses to trigger an emotion before it triggers a thought. So when you smell something, it really moves you. Now, when I was a kid, I couldn't meet a girlfriend to save my life. I was a nerd and just really had a hard time finding myself a girlfriend. So I saw an ad for Jacquard Noir cologne. And I didn't just spray Jacquard Noir. I took off the top and I poured it on. And whenever I smell Jacquard Noir now, it makes me nervous. I feel nervous because it reminds me of my 10th grade dance when I was going to pick up my date, Kim Tucker. She was a valley girl, so in LA we had these girls who put so much hairspray in their hair that when you looked at the driver's license, you couldn't see the blue background, just hair. And every time I smelled her car, I'm reminded of the feeling that I had walking to the door to pick her up. Such is the power of scent, such is the power of Drakkar Noir. So right now I want to invite you to take that lavender oil and open it up and just put a little bit on your arms. So this is created by my friends who are medicinal aromatherapists, that they believe that the plants can heal. Their medicine is nature. And every year they go to France, they go to the French Alps, and they pick the lavender and they make this oil, and you'll notice it's really potent, really pure. There's no app that can make you feel like this. If there was, then I would think it might have more downloads than Angry Birds. And in so many ways, we're becoming glorified extensions of our machines and in the process losing our humanity. And you notice when you smell something this beautiful, it really stays with you. I mean, whether or not you like my speech, I guarantee you that one of the moments that you'll remember from Grid 2011 is this lavender, because that's the power of scent. Now, a few years ago, my grandmother passed away, and I was at her funeral sitting in the audience, and I thought through some of my memories with her. I remember the time she made me laugh so hard I almost swallowed a thermometer. I had a fever. I remember how you used to make fun of me for putting too much hairspray in my hair. And I remember the last time I saw her in New York City, leaving the Brooklyn Diner on 57th and 7th Street. And the point being, you never know when you're going to remember something. You never know when a moment is going to happen in your life. So to take this information and apply it on weekends or vacations, it doesn't make sense. This is something that we want to take with us every day. You know, if you were to wake up in the morning and someone were to say to you, today will be fine, everything's going to be fine, but you're never going to remember this day ever again the rest of your life. You know, most days are like that. They're just a big blur. But if someone were to say to you, you're going to wake up today and everything will be fine, but you're going to have one moment that's so beautiful, so delicious, so powerful that you'll remember that moment every day for the rest of your life. And we can choose to live like that, so long as we're willing to live through our senses. And there's a great quote that summarizes this whole idea, this whole sensibility. It's by a guy named Robin Sharma. And Robin Sharma said that life is just a series of moments. If you miss the moments, you miss your life. Thank you.